Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Toro Talk. As you can see, this is going to be another solo episode. Schedules, as we all know, can sometimes conflict. And unfortunately, Jimmy is unable to join me today again. Hopefully, we'll be able to have more of a regular episode in the weeks going further. But today, we were going to make this switch up anyway. We've been so far into the VCT that this has become less and less of a discovery period of all of these teams, how they fared over the break. Some of these teams coming into this event haven't played any matches on stream or anything that you would consider a professional match in quite a few months. So a lot of our focus in the first couple of weeks was always going to be on like, what can we learn from these teams? What can we learn from the matches? But right now we're getting I feel like all of us here are getting a pretty solid hold understanding of these different teams. And so instead of just strictly recapping the games from the previous weekend, we're going to start to put more and more of a focus on predictions, on to just discussing the matches that are happening on the upcoming week. And you don't need me to tell you that this week is going to be a really, really big one. Not only is this the last week of group stage? Is this going to concretely define the teams that are guaranteed playoff versus the teams that are unfortunately going to be out of the mix? It is also going to be the first week of professional play, at least in North America. I can't speak for the other regions, on patch 4.04, which is a huge change. It's going to completely pull the rug out of the Astra Viper controller meta. And whether or not this thing was a good time for this patch to be introduced is a conversation that could be had elsewhere. The fact is that this is what the teams are going to be playing on for the final week of groups. Is going to be a completely different game state. Some of the matches are pretty cut and dry going forward, but there are some matches that I think this change could have definitely an effect on. So the first match of the weekend is Cloud9 versus the Guard, and in any normal situation already this would be a really big matchup, but I also think that we're opening up with the match that probably has the biggest, that will be affected the most by the change from the current patch, the old patch, I forget what number it is, 3 point something, I think 3.06, into 4.04, because the Guard in their big giant like upswing of storyline, like this is new team that's come together. Trent, this guy they basically just cold emailed everyone to get a tryout, coming in and absolutely blowing the games wide open, being an amazing Sova player himself. The Guard have made a name for like being good, solid, not conservative play, but very much group play. And so I think playstyles like that are the playstyles that are going to be nerfed the most, because you don't have your Astras, you don't have your Vipers, you're completely slow down the matches. And if we were playing on the same patch that week 4 was playing on, I think that this would be a pretty close match. Not to say that I think Cloud9 is going to blow it out of the water now, but Cloud9 are definitely getting a much bigger buff going into this weekend than the Guard with these current changes. When you just look at the straight up skill level and fragging ability, sure, if you take Trent and Saya player and just take the two of them up against Leaf and Zeppa from Cloud9, it looks pretty even, and I think you could basically do a coin flip on who would come out on top. But then when you introduce the rest of the roster, Cloud9 is just deeper in terms of raw mechanical frag ability, and with this new patch 4.04, that my guess, and I think this is echoed in a lot of other pundits and analysts as well. My guess is that is going to be the primary focus. Now, you cannot just strategize how you're going to be stacking abilities in certain things. You basically just have to run and gun, which is, I personally enjoy that playstyle. Some people have a little bit of issues with it, but nonetheless, whether you like it or not, Cloud9 are, I think, going to have a heavy advantage in this matchup. I wouldn't be surprised to see the Guard take a map or two off of Cloud9. We know that like Trent and Saya could absolutely blow up, but I think for the most part, this is going to be Cloud9 really heavy focus opening this entire weekend of play up. And it's unfortunate because like the Guard, they're in a really good position, right? They're 4-0. They're basically, they're already qualified, but their match against Cloud9, who are also already qualified, while it is in a way just a show match because they're both going to be making it to playoffs, this might still be like the first sign of that big come up story for the guard being derailed. I hope that's not the case. I do still think that they're relatively skilled. I'm not trying to downplay the abilities of any of their support staff as well as the players themselves for adapting to this new meta, but this is going to have to be an adaptation. That's the important part. In Cloud9, I think you're just going to be adapting so much faster, even if you were to just look at this particular matchup on Friday. The next match we have is going to be NRG versus Rise, and here I'm going to be favoring Rise in this matchup. I'm not going to be favoring them too heavily, but Rise, despite being a very hot and cold team, they did beat OG, and they did, despite losing to Sentinels, have a really solid matchup against that squad. So I think that they're definitely looking a lot better. If last week is anything to go off of, hopefully Rise are able to sort of take that momentum, take whatever they figured out they needed to do with their preparation to be present in the matches, continue that this week, and I think they're going to have an advantage over NRG. And I wouldn't be surprised if NRG could take this. It's probably going to be 3 maps either way, but so far I haven't really been particularly impressed by NRG here in the VCT, and Rise, despite having some pretty low lows, also show higher highs, so I think I'm not putting money on this, but if I had to gamble, I think this would be a worthwhile gamble to take, whether Rise are going to show up in the way that we saw them last week or not. Another thing to consider in the Rise versus NRG matchup is that NRG is guaranteed to not qualify, but Rise still have the potential to if they win this match. So hypothetically, that should give them a mental advantage in terms of them going into this matchup with the intention 100% to win. Granted, Rise also needs Optic to lose the match in order for them to qualify, but this match happens before Optic's match, so they won't know that they won't qualify until after this is done, which means that they're going to be going into it as if they can qualify, because hypothetically, Schrodinger's matchup, they can. The next matchup is going to be another very exciting one, Sentinels versus version 1. Like Cloud9 versus the Guard, this is not for qualification. Yes, this and the previous match, seeding is a consideration. It is something that will be factored in what position these teams place in these groups, but it's not going to be the same level of stress as what we were just talking about with Rise. Before this weekend, if it was on any other patch, I would have heavily favored version 1, but we know that Sentinels is the most Tens go kill, Sick go kill, Shazam go kill, etc. team out there. Very much individual playmakers on this team. And patch 4.04 is going to be giving them, I think, out of any of these teams, the biggest advantage, the biggest leg up. That doesn't mean that they're going to be the best team here, but as far as where they were before this patch and where they are after, I think is going to be, hypothetically, the biggest jump for them. However, that's not to say that version 1 are just full of nerds who all play off of each other and have no individual skill. They still have Penny, who is, I'm going to say it, like many others have said it before, the best jet in North America. So if you just put Penny in 10s 1v1, that could go either way. And frankly, I personally would be leaning towards Penny, just looking at their playstyle. I still think version 1 is going to come out on top in this matchup. They're not as skilled necessarily individual players as Sentinels, but the way that they play off of each other should be more than enough to get that advantage. I wouldn't be surprised if Sentinels do come out on top. I'm really excited to see how Sentinels are going to look with this new patch. This is supposed to be their patch, and if they can't make it work to the previous Sentinels powerhouse, then they're going to have to make a change somewhere if they want to get back into world beating position. But either way, Tens has already teased that he's going to be playing Yoru. Finally, we get him off the jet, so he's not just a jet one trick. I don't care what Shazam says how he can play anything. The fact is that he only plays jet, and sometimes that's really great, but sometimes I think it harms their team composition. So the fact that they can introduce a second agent into the mix onto with Yoru into this, I think it's going to add for some exciting gameplay no matter who wins. But at the end of the day, version 1, I think, have a solid enough advantage in this matchup. The next matchup is the most useless match of the entire VCT, which is 100 Thieves versus Evil Geniuses. I say useless because there is zero way for either of these teams to qualify, and yet they're still going to be playing each other. However, they are playing each other, so let's get my predictions anyway. I think this is going to be a pretty solid 100 Thieves matchup here. Again, even before patch 4.04, before that patch, I would have favored 100 Thieves anyway. JC Stani especially has been looking really, really good in this roster. Bang had a great debut. His second week, last week, wasn't the best, but he wasn't a complete liability. And then, of course, Ethan, I think, looks even more free despite being on a more supporty character. The team overall, the team chemistry just seems to work better. Hiko now not being on the Sova, being on the flank option of Viper. And again, we'll see if he sticks on the Viper. I think we're probably going to be seeing a lot more potential for like true lurk Hiko, not just clutch anchor Viper Hiko. But I digress. On the side of EG, despite Dre being a solid foundation, the rest of the stars there, Boostio and Giacomo, are completely unreliable. So maybe both of them can show up in this matchup and maybe they can defeat 100 Thieves, especially considering that there's 0 point for either of these teams to win. So who knows if their mental is going to be 100% in it. I think both are going to be trying to win for pride as well as future development, especially 100 Thieves, because they knew this was going to be a Hail Mary and they, I imagine, picked this team as the one that they're going to stick with. So just like the Knights, it's also about like looking into the future. I can't speak to whether the evil geniuses are going to have that same mindset. I'm not too familiar with the players or any sort of decision that they've made to lean one way or the other. Either way, I think both teams are going to be trying 100%, but you never know what subconsciously could sort of come into play. But still, just looking at the rosters and who's going to have the best strength on the server, 100 Thieves is probably going to be a 2-0, if I'm being honest. Yeah, frankly, I have yet to be incredibly excited about evil geniuses. So the first matchup of Sunday, the next match that we're going to be talking about, is Optic versus the Knights. And patch be damned, this was always going to be the final boss for the Knights come up story. The fact that they're coming in from a position that most people, myself included, considered the Knights to be the worst team in the VCT for having taken the last 2 matches in a row. If they can somehow defeat Optic here, or I think actually even if they don't, they're already qualified. So the Knights are in such a better position than most people expected. But as much as we all love a Cinderella story, I still think Optic Gaming has a pretty big advantage going into this matchup. And then when you consider the 4.04 patch, then I think Optic's skill ceiling is going to rise even further off of this. Yes, Ye hasn't been playing Jet so much recently, been really leaning the chamber. I could see him going back to playing more Jet, more of these duelists, now that it's not going to be so controller heavy, now that the game is not going to be so slow and ability focused. This is going to open him up and give him a lot more options, and we know just how powerful of a beast Ye can be, not to mention being backed up by Victor and Marv. On the Knight side of things, even though, especially looking at the previous weekend, Ban and Ziff, and then even Frosty for a map or two, had some really, really, really good performances. Facing off against Ye, Victor, and Marv, you have to give it towards Optic in that case. And this late into the group stage competition, there was no excuse for Optic Gaming for still being rusty, still being slow. So I think OG are going to take this. I actually wouldn't be surprised to see this as a 2-0. I think Knights are going to put up a pretty good fight, but this is essentially just a complete tier difference. Now, if Knights somehow comes out of this and just completely, like, even beats Optic in the most grueling 7 overtime 3-map series that we see, that is hats off to the Knights support staff, because the team as a whole has been just leveling up week by week by week. I just don't think that they're going to be able to reach the level of Optic by this weekend. We'll see what happens in playoffs. So they still have a lot more time to grow. Playoffs is double elimination. So I'm excited to see where Knights continue to go from here. But at the end of the day, Optic are going to be the Knights. And the final match of the weekend is Exet versus Luminosity. Both of these teams, just like Cloud9 and the Guard from their group, are already qualified, guaranteed, despite being 2-2. Just goes to show how rough of a season Evil Geniuses and 100 Thieves have had. But this is going to be for seeding for themselves. And also the fact that it is the last match of the entire weekend means that they're going to know more or less exactly who they will be facing off against depending on how they end. So to both of these teams individually, they're going to know how important this match is going to be. Maybe there's an opponent on the opposite side in the other group that they either feel incredibly confident to beat or is their kryptonite and they're going to want to try and avoid. Unfortunately for Luminosity, unless of course they wanted to sandbag this match, I don't think there's anything really that they can do to not get defeated by XZ. You're looking at Cryo and Zekken in a patch that only raises the skill ceiling of duelists even more. Like, yeah, B-Dog and Mata have good performances, but it's not Cryo and Zekken. Like, Cryo, with a hand tied behind his back, could probably 1v2 these individuals. When you look at just star versus star, there is no way that you can't look at XZ and see them with a heavy advantage over Luminosity. I honestly don't have much more that I feel that I really need to say on this. If it ends up being a 2-1, sure. I would be shocked and appalled if XZ didn't come out on top in this one. I guess if you were looking for one little loose thread on the side of XZ, Zekken doesn't necessarily always show up, but then you have BCJ there as like he has a couple of good clutches on his own the past weekend, and then Def as well, the solid anchor. Yeah, I'm racking my brain trying to come up with some reasoning why Luminosity would be coming out on top, and unless it's just different teams showing up the day of, on paper, XZ should have this. I might even say they should have this 2-0. Those are my thoughts about this upcoming week 5 of VCT North America. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and of course follow me on Twitter at KMD with 3 M's if you want to argue with me on there as well. That's it for this episode of Toro Talk Lite. We will see you next time.